let's take an example of UpGrad, right? Back in the day, it had an AWS cloud bill of $5 million every year. And we were able to bring down their cloud cost by more than 40%.
What made you choose that unsexy startup instead of going to VCs, pitching an idea, raising millions of dollars?
I am not a services guy. So my approach of doing this was just not even know if there is a services playbook. Just always first principles. We are not even talking about human hours built, all of that. We are playing a role that is outcome driven.
Shubham Garg is the founder of CodeVyasa. CodeVyasa is an AI-enabled product engineering firm serving unicorns like Mamaearth and UpGrad and has achieved double-digit million-dollar ARR without external funding.
No external funding, 10 to 15 million ARR. Most people who start a dev shop don't hit this kind of scale so fast. How did you do it, man? Shubham, welcome to the Founder Thesis podcast. There are so many companies you worked with who have come on this show. It's quite a coincidence. Like you, just take me through a little bit of your background, pre-entrepreneurial background, and then we can talk about the journey of building CodeVyasa, which in itself is a phenomenal story.
Got it.
You.
Awesome, Akshay. Thanks for having me. Great to be here. Like you rightly said, I think we've had so many customers. Few of my mentors already on the show. So yeah, great to be here. So my name is Shubham. I am the founder CEO of CodeVyasa. Prior to starting CodeVyasa, talking about my early days, I got into IIT Roorkee. Eventually, kind of did graduation from Delhi College of Engineering, and post that, coincidentally, you had all the startups which were picking up in India, right? So that was, in hindsight, the most interesting time to kind of come out of a college, right? Which is when you saw great opportunities to learn in fast-paced startups. As it were to happen, right, I got into Crownet, worked with Mr. Ashish Munjal for a couple of years, in fact, more than that. And that really got me set in terms of understanding how and what it takes to run a fast-paced startup. So, I mean, most of us would know what Crownet is. So it was a consumer tech company, and we were like one of the category creators back in those days. And my role was predominantly around product growth, bit of GTM, and then eventually I worked for companies like Haptic, which was later acquired by Geo, and then for Moglix, which
And
is a
Squad Stack also.
yeah, and Stockout Stack also, which is also into a similar space these days.
Mm.
So yeah, worked for about 5 years or so before I started my own company, which is
What was
CodeVyasa.
the
So
trigger? Like you
right,
started, I think, almost in the middle of COVID.
just
y-
before that actually.
just before. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
So
So
what was the trigger? Like what
right.
made you want to quit Moglix, which was a unicorn by that time?
Absolutely. And I was one of the
Mm.
initial members there, right? So it was a great place. It always has been a great place to work. Look,
Mm.
I always wanted to start a tech company. I mean, that was always the idea, right? I would say, while I was working at Crownet, I always wanted to kind of start out, but I would always look at it the other way around, which is it took me another 3 years to actually start my thing, is how I look at it. But yeah, I think honestly, in terms of space, I wanted to do B2B tech. Having worked in the ecosystem for 5 6 years, I had even back then a great amount of network to tap into for early adoption in terms of getting those customers. For customer feedback, when you're kind of coming up with different use cases, particularly in a services context, you need that validation, that feedback on your hypothesis. So that really came in generously, right? So we had,
Who were the early customers? Like whom did
yeah,
you, and what was
yeah,
your pitch to them? What were you like offering?
absolutely. I think initial few customers were Policy Bazaar, UpGrad, Sunstone.
Mm.
Ashish always coming to the rescue, and then we started working with larger companies, Uber.
And what was the pitch? Like what were you
Absolutely.
telling them?
So, look, back then, I think our pitch was very simple, that we are specializing in 2 or 3 use cases. Back in the day, automation QA was theoretically a massive impact that you can create if you are able to deliver well, right? So we did that really really well for for UpGrad. Then we did various use cases around DevOps for all of these mass market consumer companies, and that was driving crazy impact. So just to give you an example, right?
What does DevOps mean for people who are not
Absolutely.
from the world of software?
Absolutely. So DevOps would have multiple facets to it, right? One of the things is, let's say, let's take an example of UpGrad, right? Back in the day, it had an AWS cloud bill of $5 million every year. Now, if you were to think of it as, let's say, a warehouse to optimize for, in a simplistic example, right? And we were able to optimize, make the cloud robust, and while optimizing it to that level, and we were able to bring down their cloud cost by more than 40%. So think about it. We were helping them save literally a couple of millions of dollars every year, and we were not even charging a recurring fee for that. So we came
Hmm.
into the ecosystem as experts of doing that. We did that project for, let's say, in a phase of couple of quarters. We charged a fee for that, and that kept giving them this high a saving
Hmm.
forever almost. So
Hmm.
then we kind of doubled down. So we did multiple use cases around platform engineering. Another example could be,
And
let's
what
say,
does platform engineering mean? Like, let's keep breaking down the jargons as we go along.
absolutely, absolutely. So if you think about it, right, let's talk mobile, for example. So in a traditional sense, or even now, right, you have so many companies who have a different native mobile app and a different Android app and a different iOS app. You have two different teams building that, right?
Hmm.
Invariably, you would see Android team is at least a couple of releases ahead of iOS. The consumer is not sure, why the app looks different on different devices. The support team did not understand why a customer is asking a thing which is not there now because it's there on the old app. And we could do that, which is move them to a hybrid platform, let's say Flutter or a React Native. And one of the things they would leverage a company like CodeVyasa for that would be that if they were to do that in house, that would probably take them 3 quarters with all the rework and those kind of things associated with that. But as a company that specializes doing for the very use case for mass market consumer companies, we were able to do that in almost half the time. So there
Hmm.
you have impact in terms of your go to market, in terms of your how cleanly and tightly the migration is done, and then you could extrapolate that across different use cases across platform.
Okay. Okay. So QA,
Hmm.
automation, DevOps, product engineering. This
Yeah,
was the
yeah,
early days, like the pre-AI offerings that you
yeah,
were doing.
yeah.
Is there a reason why you didn't want to do a funded startup? Because you had worked in
Mhm.
all
Right,
previous startups you worked in were all like
right,
funded, building
right.
products, and here you are doing something which is normally seen as not so sexy.
Back in
Like,
the day, yes.
yeah, like that
Yeah,
service delivery kind of a thing where it's a
correct,
man hour based billing
correct,
was
correct, correct,
not seen as a sexy startup to build.
correct,
What made
correct.
you choose that unsexy startup instead of going to VCs, pitching an idea, raising millions of dollars?
Absolutely. And such a great question and relevant question, because if you think about it, the whole hypothesis now changing the other way around. I'll come to that later, but on the first part, right? Look, the approach you were taking, right, was not a people-centric approach, which is just multiply, put a dollar value for every human hour, and invoice that to the customer. Like I told you, in terms of the examples or the initial first use cases you are doing, right, we were attached to an outcome. We honestly thought we were great at delivering those particular outcomes, and it's about identifying customers who are looking for that use case to be done. And the moment, even back in the day, Akshay, when we made the discussion around outcome based versus a TNM, time and material kind of a base, you garner a lot more command, even in customer conversations, right? And I do hear you when you say this being almost like the not so sexy area. But like I said, I think this was even something which I realized after getting into it, was that apart from this being a really great business in terms of repeatability of revenue, in terms of the profit margins, yeah, right, most things which get less spoken about, particularly in the starting of the journey, these are things which are real problem statements, right? And if you're able to not spread yourself too thin, particularly early on in your journey, and focus on delivering those outcomes, there's a great amount of repeatability in terms of customer revenue. And that's what
Okay.
kind of followed throughout, right? Over the last 5 years, we have not tried to do hundreds of things. More often than not, we have tried to stay away from a time and material model. Again, not in all the cases you can do without it, because there are dynamics. Let's say if we work with a large bank, uh, banks and their executives are attuned to buying in a certain way, right?
Mm.
They would not
Mm.
want to do an outcome based thing, particularly when the project sizes are more than 3 quarters, right? And then it becomes a time and material. But even in that, right, when you have similar projects, live projects that you can demonstrate, that again garners a great amount of command, respect, right, and credibility as an organization in the sales cycle.
So the traditional way in which this industry works is the pod model, right? I
Yeah,
believe
yeah,
one pod has like a bunch of engineers and a business analyst
yeah,
and a
yeah.
couple of such diverse skill sets, like a bunch of anywhere from 5 to 10 people, or it could be bigger also. And you charge like per month, this pod will cost you
Right,
so much, and that pod
right,
is available to solve the customer problem.
right,
Um, how does the outcome based pricing work? Like the pod model pricing is clear, time and money kind of a
right,
pricing, but
right.
sorry, time and money, is that what you call it,
TNM,
or
time and material.
time and material?
Right.
Time and material. Okay. Um, how does this outcome based pricing
Hmm.
work?
Right. So outcome-based pricing is fairly simple. I mean,
Hmm.
you talk about the outcome that you intend to deliver to the customer. You subsequently talk about your, like you rightly put it, the pod or the composition of it and the tenure they will work. But the moment you are kind of linking your invoices to an outcome, you're giving such a great amount of confidence to the customer that, unlike a traditional IT services model where the customer gets invoiced irrespective of the outcome, here there is skin in the game from the vendor side, which is CodeVyasa, and the customer already has looked at some of the live projects where we've been able to deliver it, right? So
But
ultimately,
is it
the
easy
yeah,
to measure the outcome? Like that's what I'm wondering. How do you negotiate on what you will
right,
charge a customer? Is there a very clear definition?
yeah, yeah,
Um, because people could say that this is an outcome which you didn't cause, my own team
right.
caused it, whatever. Like how do you how does it work? Like how
Absolutely.
is that?
So,
Hmm.
yeah, great point again. I think, like I said in the starting, right, there are areas, there are projects where you have to fall back to a TNM, time and material kind of a model. But the moment you have these conversations, the customer even wants to kind of take a step ahead, right? Which is talk about the measurable outcomes, wherein not everything is measurable, right? So you have that classic input metric versus output metric, right? You could talk about how we have gone through the entire process, right? And then measure what can be measured, right? And that is how you flip the conversation, right? So I think over the last even before starting CodeVyasa, given I was in the space for good 5 years or so, right, I had a great amount of connections, and all of them, like, it's any which way is a very tightly knitted ecosystem. So all of
Hmm.
those things really came to a rescue initially, where you are kind of looking to build it ground up. You need that initial kind of 2-3 million in annual revenue for the company to kind of build itself into a machinery. Until then, it's mostly kind of a founder hustle. So that
Hmm.
initial momentum, that for you to take off, was extremely generously kind of given by you know again great companies. So I'll talk about 3-4 companies that we have worked for good 3-4 years before they went public. You had Pine Labs, We have been working with Pine Labs for the last 4 years now. One of our initial customers. You've had Yatra. We have been working for such a long time. The partnership is, great. Has been great. And then you had Mamaearth and various few examples, right? So it's almost like you're kind of growing along with your customer. Your role keeps on kind of evolving. So I think we still do pod based kind of hourly billing model along with outcome based projects. So in a given state, you would have a mid-sized company like a Yatra or Pine Labs working on both the models on multiple fronts. And
Okay.
that's what I mean
Depends
when
on
I
the
say,
nature
yeah,
of project, like whether it's a
yeah,
pod based
yeah.
or outcome. Okay. Okay.
Correct. And
Got it. Got it.
when you deliver, right, the customer
Hmm.
has a larger trust in you,
Hmm.
which means repeat business, which means annual contracts, getting
Hmm.
renewed year after year.
Hmm. So, your business was more on the software engineering side. When did the pivot to AI happen?
Right. I think again, very interesting. Over the last couple of years, right, you've had such massive changes in the ecosystem. Right. First, you had Nvidia really kind of giving computation power in abundance, right, and then you had GPT. So if you combine both of these things, they have really changed the ecosystem. uh, our shift to AI has been, I would say, uh, on multiple aspects. So, for example, I think the first adoption we had organizationally was where we started using, human layer along with automation tools, AI related things that amplify the productivity, right? So we spoke about the pod model. You have, great engineers from our side along with modern AI tools, right, that really work as a pod and really take the efficiency to a different level. Subsequently, now you have different streams emerging, right? So we could be playing a very very different role at, let's say, a different startup, which could be wherein we are playing the role wherein we act as a true engineering partner that enables them to adopt AI. So what that means is we do the plumbing, we do the foundational work, which could be building data pipelines, which could be building agents, LLM ops. That really sets the customer for AI adoption, right? And in this sense, we are creating a mode for ourselves, right? Which is we are not even talking about human hours built, all of that. We are playing a role that is outcome driven, and that lays the foundation layer for companies to really kind of build their AI systems on top of that.
Okay. So there are two ways in which how your pivot to AI has happened, if I understand correctly. One is the pod itself became human plus AI pods instead of a
Yeah,
pod of
yeah,
just humans. And the second
yeah.
is you specifically started offering AI enablement services to help enterprises
Absolutely.
adopt AI.
Yeah.
I'll talk of the first model or the first adoption before going to the second. When a pod gets to be a hybrid pod, what does that mean? What kind of tools are they using, and how do you then how does the TNM calculation happen then? Does it still remain the same way, or is there a
Right.
premium that you're able to charge because your pod has AI tools in it? Help me
I think
understand how that
both
happens.
of these things are do act as a counterbalancing factor, right? So one is the customer expectation now is getting higher and higher, right? At the same time, their status quo, their expectation in terms of, let's call it productivity per head count, has really gone up.
Mm,
Now
mm,
it's about how do you use different automation tools, let's say a copilot, that can really enhance the workflow, that can really enhance the productivity of the pod, right? And that really kind of has to keep going up and up, even more than what it is going for the customer in house, for them to continue trusting on CodeVyasa. So that would be a very, I would say, pragmatic fairly simple way to look at how that's evolving,
So
right?
there you're saying you don't necessarily have power to increase your margin by using AI, because all other DevOps agencies or development dev shops are also offering AI powered pods, and customer is now expecting you to offer an AI powered pod, so
Yeah,
without
yeah, yeah.
necessarily increasing your pricing too much.
Yeah, I think I'll explain how the margins have increased for us.
Hmm, hmm, hmm,
So, for example, wherein you needed, let's say a pod of 10 people, can you, as a team, as a pod, have ways to increase the productivity, right, by let's say a 2x, and then that does not necessarily mean the customer is going to slash the pricing into half. That does
hmm.
not mean that. So by doing all of this, you are increasing your organizationally, you're increasing your revenue per head count, and that's what I mean. That AI is actually kind of helping companies like us, kind of make more sense of the human resources, the AI resources
Got
that
it.
all of us
Okay.
have on our
So
hands.
a pod which earlier needed 20 people,
Yeah,
now a 10 people pod can deliver the same outcome, and
yeah,
the
yeah.
pod pricing stays the same. Therefore, revenue
Correct.
per employee
I'll
goes up.
not. I'll not say 20 to 10.
Hmm.
Right. I think
Or
another way
maybe
to look
like,
at this is what is the impact? What is the productivity you can do? So, for
hmm,
example, if you have, let's say, a team achieving, let's say, 10 story points in a given day, for example, can that be increased to 12? Right? Because you can't look at the customer's project being finite. I mean, there's always a new feature to build, there's always a
hmm,
different problem statement to solve, right? So
yeah.
that's not shrinking,
Hmm,
right? If you can keep on increasing your productivity, your headcount, or rather the revenue per headcount increases, and
hmm.
eventually you're making larger impact in the customer's landscape, and that results into generally happier customers. That keeps on resulting into more and more projects. Is the larger, I would say, way to look at this.
What is the story point thing that you mentioned? You said that
Okay,
if a
so for
team is able to
example,
hit 12
yeah,
story
yeah,
points instead of
yeah.
10.
So, for example, story points are ways, let's say, story points are units to calculate the amount of engineering effort required. So, just like you and I calculate distance in kilometers or miles,
Hmm.
engineers would roughly, let's say that, hey, this website is 10 story points, this mobile app is 12, and that is their prima facie judgment of how many hours it will take them to code. So,
Okay.
story points is just a, I would say, a
For
benchmark
example,
way.
let's say for a Zepto kind of an app, story point would be like you can log in, you can search, you can add to
Correct,
cart,
correct,
you
correct.
can check out, you
Right.
can put your payment information. These would be
Yeah.
like story points.
These would
Okay.
be features. These would be features, and then you could put correspondingly the story points, which is to build a search feature. I
Hmm.
would need X hours
Okay.
to change this flow, checkout flow. This would take me Y story points. So a
Hmm.
way to kind of contextualize the engineering effort it would go into building any feature.
Okay. Got it. Got it. Okay. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Understood. And your pricing has some story point targets associated with it. So if you hit more story points, then you are able to earn better, or something like that.
Not really. So, in terms of outcome-based approach, it's
Hmm.
very objective, right? You have a certain
Outcome based
outcome.
is like pure
Correct,
productivity led gains.
correct,
If you
correct,
hit,
correct.
yeah, got it.
Correct.
Yeah.
In terms of pod model, it's never because story points in itself is very subjective, right? So, like I
Hmm.
said, two engineers at different companies have different ways to look at story points, right?
Hmm.
So ours is, like I said, I think it's about input versus output metrics.
Hmm.
What are the kind of progress we are able to make on a given project,
Hmm.
along with consistent feedback from the customer. So there comes the customer success layer we have, and things like that.
Okay, got it. Uh, a little bit context about your business today. You told me
Yeah,
you have
yeah,
about a headcount of 600.
yeah.
Uh, how is this headcount utilized in terms of a split between, like, say, a pure T&M billing versus outcome based billing? What's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
split look like over there?
I would say it's almost 50-50%, right? So
Okay.
50% is pure outcome based, right?
Hmm.
And 50%, the rest 50% is the pod model, which
Hmm.
is the retainer model. I think one of the things we have taken down very aggressively is how do we push the outcome based model even at large customers. So like I said, I think typically banks or let's say other Fortune 500 customers are attuned to kind of buying in the retainer model. But over the last couple of years we have had large Fortune 500 companies, large banks agreeing to signing outcome based fixed cost projects. And
Mm.
that is in the longer run going to be our moat, right? Which is we are not just let's say a helping hand or a cog in the wheel. We are able to put our skin in the game and really kind of inch towards achieving a target in an engineering context. And that's
Okay,
what we
okay.
are itching more and
Mm.
more.
Mm. This outcome-based pricing,
Yeah.
has the industry also started moving towards it in general? Like, say, an Infosys, would Infosys also be doing outcome-based pricing, or is Infosys doing more of pod model
Yeah, I
pricing?
think it would be hybrid. So it would be large pots along with some tangible progress or measurable outcomes. And one of the reasons it's very hard to do that is, like I said, let's imagine, let's say if the large IT services providers are working with government agencies. Now it's exceedingly hard for them to put a fixed cost to a project that's going to take hundreds of people and going to take another 2 years, right? Because the
Mm.
project is humongous. Now at
Mm.
the outset it becomes impossible for most human beings to put a fixed dollar value
Mm.
without risking things either which ways. And
Mm.
that's why, like I said, becomes a hybrid wherein you do a multi-pod kind of a thing along with phase wise maybe tentative cost. I think that's the hybrid or the middle path
Mm.
which companies are doing.
Okay, okay, okay. Got it. Interesting. Okay. Okay. So the again, coming back to that basic question of that
Yeah.
pivot to AI, one way in which the pivot to AI happened is pods became AI powered pods, not just humans. And the second is the nature of business. So you are now not just selling DevOps and QA automation
Right,
and
right,
engineering services, but
right,
you're now selling AI adoption services.
right.
What are these AI adoption services? Can you just like explain? You said LLM ops, you said data pipelining.
Correct.
What do these mean?
Correct. So let's say let's talk about a large bank, right? Or let's say talk about any new upstart. For them to be AI ready, they need to have the underlining infra that has to be there in place for any magical AI to kind of operate on top of that. So in
Hmm.
again a very simplistic term, I would say think of it as a plumbing or the foundation layer for anything to kind of think of it as a launch pad, right? You're kind of setting the ground rules, and that could mean building data pipelines, data warehouse optimization. It could be LLM ops, it could be
No, but
agents.
describe these terms. I'm not a techie. I don't know what is LLM ops, what is data pipeline.
Got it. So for example, if you think about it, let's take an example of and understand what, let's say, a data pipeline or a data problem looks like. Let's
Hmm.
start let's look at a large food tech company in India, and we work with both the large companies, food tech companies in India. What
Hmm.
would be their problem statement? Their problem statement would be that they have customer data across. So they have order data, they have cancellations, they have promotions given to different customers, they have rider data, they have support related queries. Now, in a traditional sense, all of these data was being captured by these large companies, right? The problem was they were not stitched together. That was not unified. So let's say a consumer, let's say Shubham, right, ordered something, has raised a ticket on support, has had this transaction history, past history. All of those systems systematically is being captured, but is that unified in real time for, let's say, a customer support agent at Swiggy to make sense of? Until this is all there in one place, no amount of modern AI or any tool can take this to a level where it will amplify the user experience for me as a consumer here. right? And this is practically what I'm talking about when I say that you build the foundation layer, which is you solve the problem of bringing all of these data points at one place, right? For them to make sense of it and then build something magnificent on top of this. So this is one,
Okay.
let's say I've explained you a problem statement around data. Similarly, if you look at into a banks or an NBFC kind of a setup, what are the different triggers you have for a given consumer again, right? Different attributes, be it his CIBIL, be it his other social signals, be it his repayment till now for the loan he has taken, be it, let's say all the pending cases or she has, or the new cases that he or she might have had, the ITR. How do you make sense of all of these things, right? For let's say any of the modern AI stack to tell you that, hey, here is a 40% risk that this guy is not going to give you the repay the loan back in time. Now, once you build this foundation layer, is how you can then amplify your productivity, your insights, or the consumer experience using some of these modern AI stack. So this is what I mean in the second business model, which
Mm.
is making enterprises AI ready, right?
Okay.
And that's a very different ballgame. The reason I'm putting that in a separate bucket, Akshay, is that in the first model, we are building new products, we are kind of uh, driving automation. But here in the second model, it is purely a fundamental problem that is now there to be solved. Which again, so for example, we spoke about identity stitching, right? A problem statement which was not very relevant 2 years ago, because any which ways the identity was being stitched, probably with a latency of 3 hours. That's still manageable. But in today's
Mm.
context, for any of the AI models to work, right, you have to have all of those things in real time, stitched across the different data points. And that is
And
exactly what we
by
do.
identity stitching, you mean like, say, his ITR and his credit bureau report and
Yeah,
his
yeah,
repayment history, all of that
yeah,
being integrated and available at one place real time instead of every 3 hours some sort of
yeah.
integration happening.
So think of identity stitching or identity resolution as making sense of all the attributes, all the signals that you have for a consumer,
Mm.
and putting that together to build the most appropriate persona. Simple as that,
Mm.
right? User
Okay.
profiling, KYC,
Mm.
simple, very
Mm.
simple.
Mm.
Now, the
Mm.
example, the attributes you spoke about are prevalent in, let's say, an NBFC context, which I
Mm.
explained when I was giving that,
Mm. Mm.
loan repayment example. But let's say
Mm.
in a Swiggy's case, right, which is a very, very different thing, right? Which is look at orders, look at cancellations, look at customer support tickets, look at
Mm.
past transactions, those kind of things. So
Mm.
just kind of making enterprises to be able to make sense of all the data points which they store,
Mm.
and then let AI models kind of amplify the productivity or the user experience.
Okay. Got it. Got it. And
Right.
what is LLM ops?
LLM ops is, if you think about it, how do you kind of fine tune what you already have, right, in terms of large language models, right? How do you contextualize that even more given your nature of operations, right? Think of it as, let's say, a bit of a private cloud, right? And then there could be other areas. There could be vector dbs, there could be agents. I'm sure agents is something which everyone talks about these days, right?
Mm.
And other use cases around this.
Okay, okay, okay. Got it. Understood. How would you? Okay, before let me ask
Yeah.
again one more business breakdown. So, of your revenue, how much of it now comes from the software engineering business, and how much of it comes from this AI adoption?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So to be very honest, I think this is one area which is picking up. So as
Hmm.
of now, I think about 20-25% revenue, not more than that. And that's because everyone is still figuring out, everyone is seeing, is this a trend which is prevalent only on LinkedIn, or is it something which can really change my team's productivity?
Hmm.
Right?
Okay. Hmm.
But that 20% is going to increase even as our larger pie increases, right? And that's where the direction of the space is in which you and I operate.
That's where the growth is over the next few years. Hmm.
Absolutely. I mean, you simply look at the last batch of Y Combinator, which is always a great reflection of where people are aspiring to start their companies, you will see more than half of them, like even much more than half of them, into this space. And that tells you where the next 2-3 years and companies are going to be.
Mm. Okay. What is what are like the areas in which companies are embracing AI, and what are the areas where they are tentative?
Yeah, great. I think fundamentally everyone, the first answer to most people is, can we amplify the user experience, right? Then when you kind of think through, when you kind of shop around the market, there's a counterbalancing factor, which is, hey, what is the associated risk? What if the implementation goes south? And that is where I think, and all of these I discover when I talk to customers of different company sizes, which is, as of today, most people are trying to first leverage uh, AI to increase internal productivity and then take it to the consumer. However, I mean, when it started all of these discussions, it was the other way around. But I think this approach makes a lot more sense,
So
right?
leverage internal productivity means, like, say, um, using AI for managing your finance or managing your procurement, or for your software team to use coding apps instead of writing code. That's what you mean, like
Absolutely.
internal productivity.
Absolutely. So it could
Okay.
be, let's say, again, in ops heavy companies, right? If you have certain processes which have required, let's say, hundreds and thousands of back office operations people, can you figure out a way to do a proof of concept that lets you do all of that with only, let's say, 10% of human layer, if not
Hmm.
lesser?
Hmm.
Even if
Okay.
that were to go south, it's more work, but it's not a depleted consumer experience. It's not going
Hmm.
to affect your top line, right?
Hmm.
So most CXOs will have to kind of plan it in a way wherein, if anything goes unexpected or anything goes in a direction they did not anticipate, it still does not hit them in terms of top line.
Okay. Is this driven by cost saving as a motivator?
Yeah. I think ultimately, those are the two metrics most people care about, right? Which is how
Hmm.
much revenue and how much profit. And
Hmm.
cost saving is not the delta cost saving you're looking at. We are looking at something which could really, really bring it down. So, for example, if you think about it, uh, let's say contact centers, right? If you think about it, uh, a BPO would still charge a significant cost. Uh, However, if you can build that agentic layer, let's say, talking it from a bank's perspective, right? Train it on your custom data, right? Which is all the different systems you have, integrate that deeply. From there on, you would have superior quality and your cost comes crashing down. And that is why I think, I what I foresee is most people taking a build operate transfer kind of a approach, which is where IT services, the so-called IT services like CodeVyasa, right, would play a much larger game, right, which is help these customers build these modern AI stack systems, agentic workflows, run it for a few quarters, and eventually the customer takes the IP in house. And that is going to be a very big shift, because I think in Indian or even global context, right, the last 12 years, 10 years has been all about SaaS and how powerful the platforms have gotten. But I think with where the modern stack today is, right, where everything is open source, where you have low code tools, so that proprietary workflow, that proprietary tech is not proprietary anymore. That's pretty much out there for most companies to give themselves a chance to build on that. And the real power will now move to implementation. So it moves from, I would say, the power of platform to power of implementation, which is how well can you contextualize that given product or platform into your ecosystem, how well it can connect with different workflows, different systems that you have, and can you keep the IP in house? And I think that is when that is why most people today are very very bullish even on the traditional IT service providers even today, right? Because the role changes, but the pie
Hmm.
size keeps on increasing. And with this hypothesis, right, which is that SaaS companies potentially would can be large part of that can be built and kind of kept in house. That's going to increase the pie for IT services even bigger, right? And the role
Okay.
becomes much more strategic.
Hmm. So what you're saying is, this is like the classic build versus buy
Yeah, right,
dilemma.
right, right.
Like uh, typically large organizations, like let's say a Walmart would probably not buy an off-the-shelf retail POS device for the checkout counters. They would probably build something in-house versus
Right.
a small store would buy something off the shelf for the retail POS.
Absolutely. And there
Uh,
are, I'll give you another example. And, so for a large oil and gas company, CodeVyasa has built them, a customized procure to pay. Now, that oil and gas company, a fairly large public sector company, right, has been using a large SaaS vendor for that. But the problems innate to that SaaS were uh, the high amount of annual recurring cost, right? Beyond that, one size fits all kind of a approach, right? Which is that given those SaaS companies have to accommodate for so many different user personas, they are almost much more powerful and complicated than what a simple user would want, right, in an enterprise context, right? And we were able to build that in about couple of quarters. That project is live, and that's there. And eventually, when I talked to the CIO, in fact, we were planning phase two and multiple phases for that. They are now planning to replace the large ERP which they have with a custom tool that CodeVyasa can build for them. So if you
so
think
you're saying
about
like
it,
an SAP or Oracle kind of an ERP.
Absolutely, it's SAP
They're
only that they're
okay.
trying to replace. They've started with the procure to pay, the P2P, which is the entire vendor management system, and they
Hmm.
have been able to. They are like absolutely liking it, given how customized, how easy to use, and in the
Hmm.
long term how cost friendly it is. In the longer term, I use the phrase, and
Hmm.
then they'll eventually do it for an SAP, and that thesis will play out so well across customer sizes, right? So probably if you have 10 Salesforce licenses or Zoho licenses, it might not make sense to build it in-house. But the moment you talk to a mid-sized consumer company which uses thousands of CRM licenses, right, very very soon you will see that they would want to build it, keep the IP in-house, and the economies of scale really make a lot of sense in the longer run. And I think that if it turns out true, which is strongly what I feel, will really change the game for both the sides, be it SaaS players, be it IT service providers like us.
Okay, I'm going to play the devil's advocate here.
Sure, sure.
So, on the one hand, I hear you that it is thanks to AI, it is a lot easier to build custom software.
Right, right.
Why force yourself to learn Salesforce when you can build your own Salesforce, which is exactly working the way your people behave? You don't have to change their behavior for them to adopt Salesforce. Um, but the other way of looking at it is because cost of building software and SaaS is going down so much, you
Yeah,
might have thousands of SaaS tools which are very, very industry specific.
correct.
So you could have somebody who's building a CRM just for the oil and gas industry,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
somebody who's
yeah,
building a procurement tool just
yeah,
for those
yeah,
20, 30, 50 customers in the oil and gas industry.
yeah.
Very, very
Specialized
vertical.
niche. Yeah.
Yeah, very vertical SaaS tools. Why do you feel the future is not thousands of SaaS tools, but the future is everyone building their in-house
Right.
tools?
I think great question, and part of this is what I've discovered talking to large CIOs, right? Which is one of the things which has not been spoken about till now is the core IP staying with the vendor, and the vendor locks them in for multi-year contracts, right? So it's not just about the cost, it's about, can you keep your IP in house? Is there a risk
Mm.
that possesses that you're posing if you keep all of your data in the vendor's control? And
Okay.
secondly, if you think about it, the whole model of having thousands of SaaS, right, would undercut the fundamental hypothesis that there could be multiple players, because the market might be deep for 10 multi-billion dollars to be built, but the moment you have thousands of $30 million companies, right, it suddenly is not so exciting. So I'm not
Mm.
saying everything falls apart, everything moves to IT services. It's about what percentage stays with the large shark SaaS companies. And I think a great example, the parallels I keep drawing in my kind of hypothesis formation is, look at D2C. Over the last 6 years, 7 years, right? D2C companies have completely abstracted the large FMCGs, right? Initially, they had IP of dealership. They had the dealer networks. They had the brand, which took years and decades to build. But today, if you have an Instagram, if you have a Shopify, you can next day, pretty much compete with any product. You could
Mm.
get your niche, and you could compete. You could build a personal brand. You could have a deeper rapport with your customer. You could have a better customer support. So all the things that were IP to large companies have been now, pretty much, every city would have multiple D2C companies, right? Similarly, that might just turn out in the case of SaaS vendors versus now modern AI democratizing, the SaaS platforms.
Mm. Okay. Okay. Interesting. Uh, what is the you know what's typically the decision making buying process of these
Yeah,
kind of large enterprises, and how do you
yeah,
really crack these? You must have learned about cracking enterprise sales. I'd
yeah.
love to get some of those insights from you.
Right, right. I think this is fundamentally the most exciting thing for me, right? So, like I said, before starting CodeVyasa, I was a GTM person, and that has also evolved, Akshay, drastically. So, for example, initial, I would say, first 20 sales were, you calling up your, CTO friends and, kind of telling them that, hey, this is one use case I can do, and you kind of doing even a POC for them, and then eventually landing the contract. The next few customers was largely about building a storyline around your specialization, right? So you kind of research very deeply into any customer segment, be it the size of the company, or let's say on a x-axis the industry, and you backtrack what are the use cases that will make sense. And while the initial first 20 customers were direct access, like just like I can call you, I can call Ashish, that hey, this is what I am doing, would you be interested? The next 70-80 customers, right, become more about building a GTM machinery, right? You have to kind of be very very sharp in terms of your research on them, backtrack what value you can deliver to them, and keep all of that very very clean, very non salesy, right? And then you continue kind of building that GTM engine. So that's on the outbound side. I think from a decision making perspective, it's very very different, like you would imagine, across enterprises, mid market, and upstarts. In upstarts, you have almost 1 week of sales cycle. If you are able to build a case,
Yeah.
you're speaking to the founder directly, and there would invariably be common connects, or an investor might have put you in touch, and if it has to close, it will close very very soon. In case of mid market, the structure increases. You might have, let's say, a few VPs across VP product, VP engineering to kind of make sense of. Then there come would be, kind of an audit or a due diligence on your company on those levels, and then the deal gets signed. So this could take anywhere from, I would say, 4 to 5 weeks starting, and could take 2 months, right? That's the
Mm.
sales cycle. The moment you come to enterprises, you realize that there is only as much you can do in this quarter, right? Which is you kind of take a very, very patient approach, which is because you realize that procurement at a Fortune 500 company would take a month's time to negotiate. Again, a negotiation could pretty much be done like, let's say, Akshay and I, if we were to negotiate, we would either negotiate in a day or not be able to do it, but it'll not take a month's time. But that's how
Mm,
the nature of
mm, mhm,
operations are, right? And
mm.
that's why you have to be very, very sharp in terms of being a sales rep across these customer segments, which is understanding what is the nature of the play here, and just trying to expedite as much as possible. But a large Fortune 500 company could take 4 to 6 months.
How do you even become a part of their consideration set? Because you, when you go to a large Fortune 500 company, you would
Right,
be
right.
competing with these publicly listed
Yeah,
companies
yeah,
like, say, an
yeah.
Infosys or a
Right,
Wipro,
right.
or like, say, a Global Logic. How how do you really become a part of their uh, pool of vendors that they're
Yeah.
evaluating?
Absolutely. So, great question. So, the example which I gave, which is the oil and gas company for which we made, uh, apparently the last two vendors there were PwC and CodeVyasa, and we
Okay.
were able to seal the deal.
Mm,
Goes without saying, a PwC has all the credentials, but how do you build a case for yourself is how can you at every stage of decision making go above and beyond, right? So if the customer wants you to submit a proposal outlining the nuances of their ecosystem and how the new product will land and merge with all of that, instead of just doing that, can you create a meaningful proof of concept?
okay.
Can you go down to the customer's office with your engineering team and demonstrate a similar product that you have done? Could be even for a large bank, not even within the same industry, but
Mm,
something which emulates their level of nuances. So it's
mm,
pretty much very simple to understand, hard to execute, right? But very simple to and understand, which is at every step, can you outrun, can you, go above and beyond what a partner at PwC would do and his team would do.
mm.
Simple,
Okay.
right? And
Like,
yeah,
I mean, like the typical PwC partner would have learned how to make decks, whereas you have
yeah.
learned how to make MVPs. And you, instead of going with a deck, you would invest in an MVP and show them, hey, this is what it could look like. Like some sort of a
Absolutely. I
rough
think,
experience. Okay,
yeah.
very interesting.
And as a matter of fact, I know it might sound absurd. We have PwC as our customer. So
Okay.
we work with
Mm,
PwC also, and I have been, couple of PwC partners across different divisions. Right, one of them is a close friend, a mentor, right, who tells me his learnings running this for the last 2 decades, right?
mm,
And I think it's very, very interesting to pick their brains in terms of how they perceive sales cycle versus how upstarts like ourselves, how we look at things. And there's no absolute right, there's no absolute wrong, right? But it's about a difference in approach, right? And how you can kind of try to make the best of both the sides. So
mm.
that makes it really interesting. Yeah.
Okay. You are now running a 600 headcount
Right,
business.
right.
You're what, like early 30s, I'm guessing.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and this is no external fund so far, right?
Oh, absolutely not. Completely homegrown. Never, kind of raised money from outside.
Mm.
And yeah,
This is phenomenal. Like, hitting this kind of scale. What kind of ARR are you at currently?
yeah. So we are in that 10 to 15 million ARR, and
Mm. How
yes.
did you do it, man? No external funding, 10 to 15 million ARR within a couple of years. What's the I
No,
mean,
it
most
took
people
5 years.
who
It
started dev
was,
shop don't hit this kind of scale so fast.
yeah, yeah. Just one small thing. It did not take us 2 years. We are in our fifth year. We completed 4.5 years
Yeah, I
recently.
mean, like, minor details, right? Nonetheless, it is a phenomenal
Yeah.
achievement, and
No, I
most
think,
people who start dev shops
yeah.
don't hit this kind of scale. How did you do
Yeah,
it?
I think when I reflect, one of the things is that I am not a services guy. So I have like I told you, right, I've always worked in product companies. So my approach of doing this was just not even know if there is a services playbook. Just always first principles, focus on first getting an initial 20 customers. Then, like I said, you graduate to a phase where you are trying to build early team across GTM, operations, engineering, and then you try to create. So at our stage right now, the last thing we would want to do is hustle on a deal. It's about, can you have repeatability to, for us to get past that 20-25 million revenue mark, right? And for that, no amount of my personal hustle can do it. And if I have to hustle, right, I have to hustle to create the best team on marketing, on sales, on finance, engineering, of course, right? So now it's a very very different game versus what it was even a couple of years ago. And I'm not talking about because of the landscape change. I'm talking about the organizational maturity, right? Which is, how do you kind of structure and scale? Because I think they often call this a dead zone, right? 5 to 10 million. We've been just past that, which is when you get 5 million, you have hustled your way through to reach here, right? But getting past a 10 million is a very very different ball game, right? So we have just about done that, and I think now we realize that the game changes pretty much every, I would say, 5 to 8 million mark. After every 5 million, after every 8 million.
How does it change? Like I've never seen that kind of scale, right? So how did you as a leader change when you were in the 1 to 5 million, and now
Yeah,
you're in the, like, say, the 10 to 20 million bucket? How did you change as in terms of how you manage, what you spend your time doing, stuff like that?
absolutely. So I think initially 1 to 5 million is about trying to hustle your way on every deal. When I say your way, which is literally, me
So
trying to
you're saying like
identify.
sales, very sales focused, like the
It could be sales. It could be even before that, which is GTM, which is outbound,
okay, okay.
which could be on, let's say, the agreement slash negotiation phase with a customer. And
Hmm.
then comes engineering. So I would say that engineering execution does not change. It changes from a customer segment to another customer segment, which is, as an engineer, if I'm working on with Uber, as compared to if I'm working with, let's say, a manpower group, that's going to change, right?
Hmm.
Because there are two different uh, customers for CodeVyasa, so that's different. But the game changes all the more when you're trying to win a manpower group, do outbound to them, to present your capabilities in the form of sales, negotiate contracts, procurement rates, those kind of things. That's a very very different game when
Hmm.
you are 1 to 5 million and 5 to 15 million. Uh,
How is it different? Like when you're doing the same, uh, like contract
I think,
negotiations,
yeah.
etc.
So I'll tell you a macro answer to that would be that at a 1 to 5 million, you are trying to master your own self in terms of doing all of that. When you get past 5 million, you want your VP sales, director sales to be able to do that
Hmm.
consistently.
Okay. You want to be able to step back and not be the hero of the pitch, but see if your team can be the hero of the pitch to win that client.
Yeah, I think when you're in that 1 to 5 million mark, you're trying to be the best version of yourself, right? Which is to kind of hustle your way on everything. When you kind of get past that mark, uh, there comes problems of repeatability. The hustle you're able to do as a founder, can you have a team that can replicate across 20 instances in parallel? And for that comes, I think, the hard part of recruitment plus training plus, having that dynamics where people want to really give it their all every single day. And that's I'll not say harder game or an easier game, that's a different game. So and then you have to have systems, processes that, as a founder, let you identify the shortcomings, the areas of improvements in the fastest way possible. And that is where systems, processes, dashboards, reviews, those kind of retraining, those kind of things come into the picture.
How do you build? a team of people who want to give it their all every single day. Like that
Yeah,
sounds incredibly hard to do.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think no, it is, and I think what I've realized is, first of all, there's never a straight answer to that. So there's no playbook that can give you 100% results all the time. The question I'm assuming is that how do you maximize your chances? I think which is always about finding people who really want to build a career. So you would have for different roles. So for example, in finance, you have great folks, right? But you would want people with a lot more stable persona track record there, because that's the nature of finance ops, versus let's say in more aggressive dynamic roles, let's say in SDR or in account executive, where you need people who might not be from, let's say, a PwC or a McKinsey, right? But have done, let's say, this and this, and more importantly, are really into learning and building a network for themselves. So that's one example. If I have to answer that for CSM, I would say people with a lot more empathy, because they're dealing not just with the customer, they're also dealing with our engineering team, and the dynamics could be not so transparent in CSM, right? So you need somebody who's not as volatile as probably in the AET, and a lot more, I would say, kind of stoic on that front.
Okay, so Shubham, let me end with this. Like, you're a fairly young founder yourself, and you probably have a lot more empathy for somebody who's just starting their career today. What advice would you like to give that person?
Oh, anybody who's starting the career, not necessarily a company, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think the number one thing is you can't overstate the value of hard work. I think you have so many resources at your disposal, but it's about, are people willing to zero in, and really kind of make the most of everything which is available, and most importantly, their time. So I think that would be the number one skill. uh, I've seen so many of my, like, the CEOs I've worked with, working absolutely round the clock, like so hard. I think that's the most unstated, less stated kind of a thing. That's one. Second would be, I think having mentors really help. In the starting, I, separately, when we were talking, Akshay, I told about how Ashish has helped me, not just in the during the tenure when I was at Crown, but even beyond, right? How so many other mentors of mine, right? Sandeep and so many others have been helpful throughout. Uh, that goes a long way. It almost gives you the insight that you would come up with a year down the line.
Hmm.
So you kind of are able to almost see the future, because somebody who has done that, right? And I till date, I reach out to so many people, and the funny part and the best part is that people are very generous. If they look at you as somebody who's working hard, and is somebody who is coming up with structured questions, they'll respect you, they'll help you. And the third would be, I think, risk taking. I think beyond the first two things, you have to be risk taking. Of course, you could calculate, but there's no way you can kind of make it big without kind of taking that bold move. So yeah.
Hmm. Thank you so much for your time, Shubham. It was a real pleasure.
Awesome, Akshay. It was lovely to chat. Thank you so much.